talk to you about a little bit of an investigative report I'm working on right now. And I'm going to take one more day to do it right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser here, but I'm going to really unpack it tomorrow. There's this funny word, and I honestly hadn't heard of it or bothered to look it up until about a week ago. It's acronyms, and sometimes elites use acronyms and fancy phrases to keep things not understandable. Like that, one of the purposes of jargon is to have like a small society that insiders know what's going on, but outsiders don't. It's one of the reasons why lawyers love using Latin phrases, is just to, there's an elite guild and you're not in it. The UN is awful for that. They use all sorts of acronyms and short forms and weird terms. One of them is GFANZ. What? GFANZ. And I heard that Mark Carney was the co-chair of GFANZ, and I just was bored right away, and it's just so weird. But I Googled it, and it stands for Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And that's just as boring and as eye-glazing. But if you dig a little deeper, it's actually shocking. Let me go to the homepage of GFANZ. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ, is an independent, no it's not, private sector-led, no it's not, initiative focused on mobilizing capital, that's a euphemism, and removing barriers to investment in the global transition. Do you understand what it is? That's designed to hide meaning, not to share meaning. But let me tell you what it means. These are people who are shaking down big banks to get them to stop lending money or investing in oil and gas or carbon. When they say transition, they're not talking about transgenderism, transitioning from being a boy to a girl or something. They're talking about transition off the carbon economy, transition to shut down the oil sands. So this is a global group of elite VIPs. When they say it's private sector, well, that's part of it. But of course, this was a United Nations project. It was hatched in Glasgow at one of these UN anti-global warming conferences. This is to kill the world's oil and gas, natural gas, fracking, oil sands, energy systems. And Mark Carney was the co-chair of this for years. His purpose was to pressure companies to leave it in the ground while he, of course, jetted around in private jets. And we all know about this. We know about ESG. That's the corporate version of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In a corporate setting, they say ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Well, what does that mean? Well, environmental means only one thing. Are you shutting down carbon? So they detest oil and gas industries. And what they do is they pressure companies to divest, not based on financial reasons, which is the fiduciary duty of officers and directors of a company, but based on ideology. ExxonMobil, for example, is one of the most profitable companies in the world, has been for years. It's involved in oil and gas. If you're doing your fiduciary duty to your shareholders, you think, how can we maximize profits? Not so with ESG. They're trying to force into these companies a new measurement, which is how woke are you? How environmentalist are you? Do you please not the shareholders, but Greta Thunberg? We know that Mark Carney admires Greta Thunberg. And it's one thing to pressure a company from the outside, to have a little protest outside their annual meeting, or to have a scene in some spectacle like Greenpeace does. But what these environmentalists have done is go in through the investors. So, for example, BlackRock, which is the most famous asset management company, Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, is a woke. He's obsessed with wokeness. And what he does is he invests his clients' money. It's not his own money. And puts it in this company or that company and buys an enormous number of shares. Larry Fink is, around $20 trillion worth of assets under management. It's not Larry Fink's money. He's investing it for his customers. But he says to the companies in which he invests, I demand that you decarbonize. I demand that you have, I mean, it would be the reason why, for example, Bud Light went fully trans. That's one of the ESG values, is how sensible or sensitive are you rather to the rainbow agenda? Where's your transgenderism? If you're wondering why a company suddenly goes woke, odds are it's because Larry Fink or other huge asset managers have demanded that the recipients of their investment do so. When I was in Davos this year, I bumped into Larry Fink, and one of my first questions to him was, why are you putting your ideology ahead of your fiduciary duty to shareholders? Remember this? Here's me asking that question of Larry Fink.
Mr. Fink, are you going to follow Donald Trump's plan and get rid of DEI and ESG in your companies? BlackRock really is the opposite of Donald Trump in so many ways. You're authoritarian, you're anti-populist, you're top-down. Are you going to change it all in light of the U.S. presidency? How is Donald Trump, have you talked to Donald Trump since he was elected? Is the World Economic Forum a counterpoint to Donald Trump? Why are you running away from simple questions? Just answer a question. Have you talked to President Trump yet? Why are your bodyguards pushing away journalists, Mr. Fink?
Funny enough, a couple of years ago, I was in Davos and I bumped into the boss of State Street, which is a huge asset management company just like BlackRock. And their boss stopped and answered my question. He was sort of mad at me that I dared suggest that he was doing anything other than following the fiduciary duty of his investors. Take a look.
Can I ask you a little bit about State Street and ESG? Are you pulling back from it the same way BlackRock is?
No. And why don't we just set this up formally? But no, we're not pulling back from it.
Well, what about critics like Elon Musk who say it's a kind of reverse racism?
Elon's got his opinion.
What about shareholders who say you're putting other goals ahead of your fiduciary duties? You're putting cultural Marxism or affirmative action. Those may be political values, but they're not designed to get a maximum rate of return.
If there's firms that are doing that, I don't know of that. That's not how we do it. We have one focus, which is shareholder value, period.
Well, then how, you just told me, though, you're sticking with ESG.
We stick with value. It's about value, not values.
Can I ask you about state governments that are pulling their funds out of ESG firms, like the state of Florida, for example? Are you worried that State Street will be hit by divestment from companies that are rejecting ESG?
So we only focus on creating value for our shareholders, and if you look at our track record, that's all that we've ever done. And what we focus on is what do long-term investors need to be thinking about? What are the kinds of risks they need to be thinking about? And they need to make the decision. That's what we've always done.
What were your goals? What are your goals here?
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, why was the State Street boss so worried, but the BlackRock boss, well, he wouldn't engage? I think one of the things that's happened over the last few years is that especially Republicans have woken up to the way the GFANZ extortionists, I call them, operate, that they basically say, follow our political biases, do our political errands, or we will divest, which is not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to follow their shareholders' interest. They blackmail, they blacklist, and that could be seen as a crime, a cartel. In the United States, they have a RICO statute, the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations. I think that's what RICO stands for. I'll have to look it up. It's usually used against gangs. But what happens if you're not trying to extort some shopkeeper like the mafia, which is what RICO laws were used for? What if you're trying to shake down companies for billions of dollars? Mark Carney was the co-chair of GFANZ, and he went around the world by private jet, meeting with companies and demanding that they divest from oil and gas and coal. And if they didn't, he threatened them. This isn't my theory. This is what the United States Congress has concluded based on their research and their interrogation of Mark Carney. Did you know that Mark Carney was interrogated by the U.S. Congress about whether or not he was part of an extortionate cartel? Did you know that? I didn't know that because the mainstream media doesn't talk about it. GFANZ is boring to me. It's going to be double boring to them. I was going to have a big presentation today, but I'm going to save it till tomorrow so I can do a proper job of it.